Madam President, I rise to add just a few words to the debate on, or the motion presented by the leader of government business. I think this morning it probably has been a very interesting tone set, and it's probably because of the spirit within which we've chosen to contribute. And I'd like to encourage that. It's very good for the Senate. Madam President, the idea of borrowing, and in this case, not new borrowing, as was stated correctly by leader of government business, but merely overdraft facility, is in itself not always an issue that creates any problem for anyone, because we all know that it has become an accepted norm that governments will borrow. But I suspect, Madam President, one of the issues that we can have when we come to the Parliament with a resolution like this one is that the context within which we've operated can be problematic for us as a Parliament. Because the people have developed a certain expectation, or they've developed a certain attitude towards what has been happening before. Something like this piece of this amendment that, as we have correctly stated, is not new borrowing, still creates a certain level of anxiety in the minds of the average St. Lucian. So, Madam President, we may need to be more prepared or more empathetic to anyone who may have an issue or who may become suspicious of something that, of something that is a norm. And Madam President, that is why I would like to appeal to the government to ensure that their practices, because you're not a government for when you get elected, you're expected to serve a term of 5 years. So if for 4 years, 4.5 years, you have developed a habit that has created a certain level of anxiety among the people, on the day that you come to do something that is not exactly what you've done before, it obviously makes people uncomfortable when they need not be. And we have, Madam President, in the last few weeks in the St. Lucian Palace, been introduced to a new term. And that's why I'm using this context. I've been hearing a new term, Madam President, mardi poete. It's as if St. Lucians have gotten to a point where every sitting of the House, which normally occurs on a Tuesday, is mardi poete. And they basically expect, okay, the government is going to come back to borrow again. And mardi poete, of course, would in English would be considered a Tuesday, borrowing Tuesday. And so, while the last sitting was not necessarily a sitting where there was new borrowing, the government has to be cognizant of the fact that the average St. Lucian, including the opposition, is always wary when that term borrowing comes up. So, I will not attempt to propagate any, conspiracy theory about what is obviously not new borrowing, but I will say to the government that should there have been any of that suspicion or any of that discomfort to our populace, it may very well be because of the habit that the government had developed prior to this, this borrowing. So, I will say, Madam President, based on what was outlined under Section 63(1), that the borrowing is supposed to be to deal with capital and current expenditure. But it would be helpful if the leader of government business would have enlightened us a little bit more on what particular capital expenditure projects this is going to address. Now, while I know that the arguments may be raised that, oh, it's in the budget, well, the budget is presented at a certain time of the year. But when you come back to the Parliament to approve borrowing for specific projects that may or may not be in the budget, the onus is on the government to explain to the House. We come to this House, and when the opposition asks questions about why the government is doing what it's doing, sometimes, Madam President, we behave as if we're not supposed to ask. The onus is not on the average St. Lucian or the opposition. The onus is on the government to explain to the House what will be done, what are the projects, what are the initiatives that will be done or will be undertaken with the borrowing. I did, to her credit, listen to the leader of government business mention under recurrent expenditure, salaries and so on, which we know, but particularly with capital expenditure, I think it was an opportune time for the government to give some detail and explanation on that specific area. And when these things are done, Madam President, there is no room for, or little room for speculation. So I will then ask, what are the projects? Are they campaign projects? We know we're in election year. We have all kinds of roads and so on being built. Or could the government have pointed out from the estimates or from whatever source, these are the projects based on what will come in to deal with the overdraft that we'll be embarking upon. And so it leaves very little room for what I'm actually doing today. So, Madam President, as I said, I was going to be very brief. I believe that when the government takes that approach, which is very responsible and transparent, there leaves very little room or opportunity for the opposition, civil society, and the average St. Lucian to become suspicious and to come up with terms like Madi Puiti, to make it seem or to appear that all the government does is borrow. So I think the government can help itself, it can help the Parliament, it can help all of us avoid that unnecessary situation. So I hope that in future it will be considered, and once again, that when recommendations like these are made, just because it's coming from the opposition, that merit will be seen in it, and the government will take heed and put it into practice. Thank you, Madam President.